What happens when two sidekicks try to carry a show? Find out next on Ungrumplenting, something like that.
And this is Gene the Fear. Welcome to Unrelenting. And Darren, unfortunately, I think he died or something. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but that's all right. We've got another co-host. Bemrose, how are you?
From America's Left Coast, this is Ryan. Oh, you said that.
Yeah. Well, I kind of feel like we've been doing a show for a long time. I don't know. It just feels that way.
Well, like we kind of do the same show through an intermediary.
We do. Yeah. And although some people seem to think that he carries all the weight, I would disagree. I think, frankly, it's the people that are his co-hosts that carry the weight, and he just happens to be on all these shows.
He's not even that interested, as evidenced by the fact that the show that he gets that makes, 5 times as much donations as all his other ones combined is the one he's doing right now at this very moment. The rock and roll.
Because he has time to do that show, just not either of our shows. That's what it comes down to.
So when I said, hey, I'm going to go record a show with Gene, he went ahead and spilled the beans on the stream on his R&R show, which he's doing right now.
Oh, did he now?
He said, so Ryan Bemrose and Gene are going to be recording right now. And I bet that the thing they're going to talk about, and by the way, I'm making this true now. I bet the thing they're going to talk about is why my show with Larry gets more than my show with Darren and my show with Gene. I'm like, well, one of the reasons is you do a show with Larry. You keep begging off the ones for us.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Like this week was the lamest excuse ever. He's like, oh, my studio's flooded. So podcast underwater.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he gave me a similar excuse. He said, yeah, my studio is flooded and I spend all this time like vacuuming water and carrying buckets. And now my back just kills me and I can't stand straight up. I have to be vertical.
On Friday?
Yeah.
Because he did his show on Thursday. Man, I don't know about this guy.
I know. No, it's like some people have selective memory. He has like selective reasons not to do a podcast. That's what it comes down to.
Well, that's fine. We're way more interesting anyway. Larry has a better voice, but we're more interesting.
Well, Larry has a sub-audible voice, so I'm not sure who's listening to that show because all I hear is.
Oh, I have custom EQ settings I use for Planet Radio.
Oh, you do? See, I never did a custom EQ. So, you just boost all the?
Yeah.
You have to transpose the pitch?
Everything below human hearing, I just boost way up, and then
okay.
And you run it like with an old school 2.0x thing that doesn't
doesn't do a pitch shift. So you have to let it ramp. That makes more sense now. Yeah. So I guess you could actually hear understand what they're saying then.
And then you get Larry, who normally talks really slow, and instead he starts sounding like you and I, and it's just,
right, which is like normal speed. People think we accelerate the podcast speeds, but no, this is how we actually talk.
Well, you actually tell people to accelerate the podcast speeds.
I do.
I guess you hate them.
I just feel like the amount of information that they're listening to on my podcast, it'd be better if it was fit into less time.
Oh, I have one of the reasons why, and we were discussing this before the show. I've become not quite as good at going out and finding new shows for the No Agenda stream, and the reason is other things going on, and my podcast listening time has gone down. To the point where there are a few, like in the community, and I don't want to name names because I really like these people, but there's a few people who do 2+, 3+ hour shows.
Right.
I like their shows a lot, but I just cannot put that much time in. But I mean, not that I want to give our co-host Darren any more press, but one of the shows I do catch all the time because it's short is Random Thoughts.
Mm-hmm. It is short.
Anything sub an hour I can fit in, but when you do 3+ hours, I'm like, I can't. I cannot do this every week.
On 2X, that show literally takes 7 minutes. It's perfect.
And the whole thing is, there's no question about it. No question about it. No question about it.
Darren has a particular way of saying, here's the interesting part. I do a show with him that's at least 2 hours long. You do one that I think is comparable.
We pretty much end at 2 hours every time. Every time we do Grumpy Old Bens, we always have a couple of extra stories that we just don't get to because we're like, it's been 2 hours, we're done. Screw you guys, we're gonna shut off. And we're both totally cool with that.
But yet, by himself, he can't come up more than 20 minutes worth of conversation to have.
Well, I don't know about your show, but on Grumpy Old Bens, I don't let him talk for more than 20 minutes out of the 2 hours anyway.
That's probably about right.
I do tend to dominate the show, but I figure, he's got a lot more podcasts than I do.
I don't think he talks more than 20 minutes on anything he does, because certainly on the music thing, that's the most popular and the one that generates him an actual income, where he plays pirated music and makes money off of it.
No, he borrows all of his money-making content is from bootlegs.
Well, exactly. So that's literally, he's playing stolen material to make money from. I mean, I'm shocked he isn't in prison at this point.
I wasn't going to say stolen, especially since on the last Grumpy Old Bens, which, by the way, was in June. I did, in fact, point out that, there is a lot of places where content is being made unavailable. And I am of the opinion that when a content owner decides to make something unavailable at any price anywhere, then it becomes a moral imperative to pirate it. I would never do such a thing myself.
That's a pretty extreme position to place yourself into.
Have you ever listened to my show? Extreme positions are kind of my thing.
I mean, yeah, but it's like that can have negative consequences too.
Oh?
Like, for example, when I banned CSB so that he couldn't read my tweets, there's a reason that I banned and didn't just mute.
Block is the word, yeah.
Yeah. Because
so vindictive.
There are people there that just become not worthy of hearing me.
And I'm the one taking extreme positions?
Well, you're a total extremist. No, I'm like a middle of the road guy.
You're all a public website, and so everybody in the world can read it except fuck you.
Yeah, I've been the one championing I'm the one championing there to be a band tag in the podcasting 2.0 where you can explicitly provide IP zones that you would like to exclude from distribution. That should be an official standard.
Yeah, well, I'm more of the opinion that the public domain should not be partitioned out into individual fiefdoms. Turns out that Silicon Valley doesn't agree with me, which is why everything is a walled garden now.
Yeah, I think everything is a walled garden. I think that's been moving in that direction for a long time. As
my latest extreme frustration has been with open source projects that decide to put all of their communication, including things like changelog and documentation, on Discord.
Oh yeah. Which is not an open garden.
No, it's pretty much as closed and cut off as you possibly like. Okay, so here's what Discord was made for, and still does a pretty good job. Is you have a little tiny gaming group, your guild, whatever it is. In fact, their servers, which are horribly named because they just abuse the word server and make every IT guy's teeth itch when you talk about a Discord server, which is nothing more than a row in a database that collects a bunch of channels, but whatever. Their servers were originally called guilds. And when they realized that they were going to be getting people who weren't gamers, they decided to change out the term. It's a terrible term to use. But the use case,
I kind of prefer clan over guild.
Clan works too. The use case that works really well is a small group of people, very, tight community who wants to have a chat together. Like, even what you and I are doing. I have recorded podcasts on Discord because the audio quality really isn't bad. And the latency is really low.
I'll tell you,
the audio quality is acceptable and the latency is low, which is my most important thing.
Yeah. And I'm on Discord like every day for 8 hours a day. So
I'm sorry.
It's funny.
For what? You're not gaming that much, are you? Oh, you might.
I actually am.
You are. Okay.
No, I'm game a lot, dude. But it's
some of us have to work for a living. Some of us even try to podcast for a living.
Yeah, that's not working. That's the opposite of working, actually. Unless you're like playing stolen music and getting paid for it. In which case, I guess it's work. But No, I totally share your opinion on Discord. I don't like that they're taking political stances, and they have in the past, they've actually banned people for literally politics they don't like.
Oh, that's yes, yet another issue. I mean, the first ones that I come across are the fact that it's a walled garden, the fact that so Discord is, first of all, absolutely, they're, a walled garden to an extreme, to the point where they will kick you out and ban your account if they catch you modifying the client. No, they're like, the app that we provide and nothing else. Well, that app is crap. It is utter shit for accessibility. It's terrible for people with vision problems. It's terrible for the colorblind.
Who cares about the colorblind?
I have an opinion, but that's normal for me. So
I also dislike their app because it crashes games, which is not something you want an app to do that's made for gamers.
I don't even like the fact that it scans my process list. If Windows 8 had an easy way to sandbox an app and just run it in its own virtual machine without compromising all of my performance, I would be running Discord in that and saying, yeah, go ahead and scan this empty VM with nothing in it.
So you know what I do? I run my Discord on my Mac.
Yeah, I was going to say it.
And then I run the game on the PC.
Yeah.
Because the people I'm talking to don't care.
No, they shouldn't. It's supposed to. Like, I want it for voice chat and the occasional text, IRC. And that's what it's good at. But what it's not good at is, it's absolutely terrible for documentation, because the only textual place you can put anything in is an infinite scroll ephemeral IRC room.
Yeah.
Which is, and what's the other communication medium? Video and audio. No, that's ephemeral. So there's nothing persistent. There's no way to make anything that can be around. Their search function is bog standard Elasticsearch that doesn't even, you can't customize domains. You can't use multi-term searches worth of crap.
No.
It's terrible for finding. And just this morning, and the reason why this rant even came up is I was looking at an open source library that I was needing to use for one of my projects, and they had put out a new version, but the site where they put out versions on GitHub, but there was absolutely nothing on GitHub that, like, they hadn't updated and checked in the source on GitHub. They just pushed the new library. And I'm like, what did you change? What is different? And the only thing I found was in their README, it said, go see our Discord for a changelog.
Oh, that sucks.
And their client only has a maximum of 100 guilds that you can ever join, clans, whatever. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so if I want to know what the hell you changed, tell me which of the other 800 open source project, or 99 open source projects that I've had to join to read their change logs. Which ones should I dump in order to read your freaking change log?
No, it's bullshit. And I've run across the same thing where there are companies that literally will distribute their they don't even they may use a GitHub, but nothing's documented, and then the links to what you're actually looking for are all through Discord.
Yeah,
it's like, this is stupid. You add nothing to the experience. You can put all of that into GitHub so that it's human readable. And, you can still use Discord if you really want to, but don't make me go to your Discord just to be able to pull the data out.
And you touched on one of the root problems that will inevitably come up with this company, with using this service, is that, well, it's ultimately a problem with anything centralized in Silicon Valley, which is, of course, why they're all nefarious, is you're walled in to one company, to one client. They have full 100% control over everything that happens in every chat room, every client. There's no control as far as we know amongst their staff. Any staff member, the janitor can walk into the Discord building and read everybody's private DMs because
absolutely,
or modify.
There's no expectation of privacy whatsoever on there. And while I'm a slightly bigger fan of Slack, over Discord for corporate stuff. Slack has plenty of their own problems.
It's ultimately the problem is centralization. Centralization brings with it all kinds of problems. And the one that we've seen in the last 3 years, and I can't believe people are not starting to figure out this stuff out because it happens over and over, is canceling. If I personally have had a Discord account since before they were asking for phone numbers, which is why Discord doesn't have my phone number. But for all of the time that I've ever spent there, for every message I've ever posted, everything I've ever looked at, everything I've ever read, all I have to do is say the wrong thing once in a private chat with somebody who's totally cool with it. And an admin might stumble by and read my private message and say, oh, this guy's right wing. Let's ban his account. And gone. Everything I've ever done. Gone.
Yep.
That is true of any centralized service. It can happen on Twitter. It can happen on Facebook. There's no judicial process. There's certainly no due process. There's no. It's really just anybody who happens.
To be fair, it's not like this is any different than what I was doing in the 80s, running my own bulletin board. But if I didn't like somebody, they get kicked. And
then I go to another bulletin board with the same on the same open source PHPBB software or whatever you were using.
Yeah. The software might be the same, but the contents of the downloads was, believe me, very different.
And I could convince if the admin was a total douche, I could convince my whole community, hey, let's go to this other place that has exactly the same features.
Yeah. It's the key being that there was not a central. Like the play. In fact, the reason we were on bulletin boards was because we didn't like CompuServe.
Yeah.
We didn't like Genie.
The difference is that you were not the only admin of every bulletin board ever.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you couldn't just with one database poke say, I'm sorry, you're never allowed on a bulletin board again.
Wouldn't that be cool though? Man,
I mean, you would, if you had that power, you'd use it on CSB.
Well, I would have. Yeah, absolutely. It's like you're blocked off of everything for a year. But after a year, I restored everything back. Unlike what I can say about what I'm still perma-banned on IRC, which is, now been like a decade, I think.
At least it's been since longer than IRC has been available to hear you tell it.
No. I don't think
IRC was
been
invented in the
available
1970s, and you've been banned from this chat room since.
I'm not banned from IRC, the protocol. I'm banned from that particular chat room.
Only
I've been
because
using
it's decentralized.
IRC
You're making my point for me.
Yeah. I may be making your point for you, but I'm just saying that I'm a much more gracious person given where I restored CSB than the fact that certain people banned me, Darren, off of IRC. Many years ago. And my understanding is he doesn't even remember what the command is to unban. So there you go. I'm just perma-banned.
He might not know this, and hopefully he'll never listen to this show, so he won't find out.
No, he wouldn't.
But, I don't think he has permission anymore.
Good.
I take away his op line every once in a while because because he uses it, and we can't have that. So
Yeah, it's weird. I was one of the original admins on that IRC before any of you all were listening to No Agenda back in the day.
I don't believe that's true.
That's totally true.
Because Zero Net IRC
Zero literally,
did not exist before I was listening to No Agenda.
Well, you may have been listening to No Agenda, but
I wasn't in the troll room.
You weren't. You weren't just in the troll room, but no. I was involved with Void Zero back when he was still working for the company that was providing the hosting for No Agenda. Yeah. Because I was also doing a podcast with those guys, and so back then, before, I guess he would have already had it up and running because I couldn't have been an admin before it existed. But he gave me admin rights on there like way back when. This would have been timeline wise. I want to say it would have been 2010, maybe 9, right around there. About 13 years ago.
Yeah, I was listening to the show back then, but I didn't join the community until about 15.
Yeah. And
I honestly,
you know that whole story, right? That whole backstory. So it was basically Alex and Gitmo Slave and Void Zero.
Mr. Oil.
Yeah, Alex is Mr. Oil. Yeah.
Okay.
I've
definitely heard Void Zero's side of the story.
Yeah. So basically, they had, Mr. Oil put up the money to set up servers to host No Agenda, and he got Void Zero was always like the actual techie guy.
He still is.
Mr. Oil was mostly a listener, fan, and had an income. And then Gitmo Slave, I think, was somewhat techie. I think he worked in tech, but he wasn't doing the work. The way I remember kind of joking to Void that, he's like the guy in those cartoons where you have the one guy digging the ditch and then 4 people standing around telling him what to do. I was kind of envisioned him in that role.
And in this meme, which person were you?
Oh, I was definitely one of the guys standing around just telling him what to do. But I wasn't really, because
were you the one taking the picture?
It didn't. Yeah, exactly. There you go. That's a better way to phrase it. I was the one taking the picture because I didn't have a horse in the race. I was certainly a No Agenda fan, but I'd already known Adam by this point, and I was doing a show with Alex with Mr. Oil. The post it was essentially the post No Agenda show. This was the after show, so it was on immediately on after No Agenda wrapped up on the live stream. And initially No Agenda was hosted by Adam's old company.
Yes.
And eventually, when
I'm pretty sure that was about when I came on.
Okay.
I remember,
yeah,
I was listening to even then the RSS feed. So when I started listening to the show, the RSS feed was already maxed out at whatever software they were generating could only list 100 episodes. And the current episode was 133.
Okay.
So I went back and listened to episode 33. That was the first one I ever listened to.
Yeah.
And then went to catch up.
Yep.
And then I was just about caught up and the feed switched out.
But then you could get access to the first few, right? The first 33 episodes.
No, I've never listened to the first 30 episodes.
Really? I know that there are archives. You could download them.
This is a terrible admission to make, but I know that I am, judging by the number of people who are like listeners since show 1, I am in fact the only No Agenda producer who has not been listening since show 1.
Oh, that's funny.
Everybody else every single person who comes on says, "Oh, I've been listening. I've been listening since show 1. Listening since show 1." Show 1 was.
There were a lot of people that say they started when Joe Rogan.
As far as I can tell, show 1 was by far the most listened to episode of the entire series. To everybody, listeners since show 1.
I get the funny point you're making, but I think most people these days would say that they started listening when he was on Rogan. I did start listening to episode 1 because for a long time prior to that, I was a listener of Adam on the Daily Source Code.
Yeah.
And then he said he's going to do this thing with John. And I'm like, oh, I've been a fan of John's writing for many years. This should be good. And it was mostly like, wine reviews and restaurant reviews.
Okay. Well, the early episodes had a lot of that. It was like restaurants I'll never go to, but.
Yeah, they're fancy restaurants usually. Yeah. But again, this is back in a time where, Adam was, put it in quotes, but he was basically running a company. I don't think he really liked the business side of running a company. He just liked the travel that he got with it and the good aspects of running a company, not all the tough decision making that's involved.
Not the day-to-day work. Ugh, nobody wants that.
Yeah. And he's definitely been more interested in tinkering, which I think is also where his talent lies.
It's funny.
Which is what he's doing with Podcasting 2.0.
I had never heard of Adam Curry before No Agenda. I grew up in a rural part of Washington State where
so you never had MTV.
We never had cable. Cable TV was a fancy thing that only people in the city got when I was a kid. And no, what we had was the big ass 14-foot boom antenna on the roof, which every time there was a windstorm, the wind would start pointing it the wrong direction. And my dad would be like, Brian, get up on the roof and repoint the antenna. And then he'd like yell out there telling me when the picture was good. And so I never saw, like, MTV was not an experience that I ever had when I was a kid. Obviously never heard of Daily Source Code, but one of my coworkers had turned me on to podcasts and told me about this show called This Week in Tech.
Yep.
And
Lee Laporte.
That was where I got into podcasting, because Twit back in the day was actually pretty compelling, and it had pretty much everyone worth listening to in the tech space. So I liked it. I liked the early days. This wasn't my first introduction to John C. Dvorak on Twit, but it was the first thing he ever did that I liked, because I hated his writing. Really? Yeah, part of it was I was working on Windows, and he was always just absolutely destroying Windows in writing.
See, I would say that's hilarious, because what I remember him from was the 80s, where he had the back page of Mac User or Mac World, one of those two. And it was a contrarian article. So every week or every month when that magazine came out, I would read his article first, because he's the kind of guy you'd love to hate, because every article talked about something new that just came out for the Mac and how bad it is. It was always a very negative on the Mac, pro Microsoft, anti-Mac kind of article that happened to be on the back page, the page before the cover, essentially, of a Macintosh magazine. So it was like, what made it good was, while he seemed to be ragging on the topic that the magazine was about, he's a good writer, and he was always able to put just enough in there to make you kind of begrudgingly agree to some extent, but still want to fight him about it.
Yeah, he is a good writer, and I have to agree with that now. But let me tell you, when I put my blood, sweat, and tears into a product, and then he just comes out and mercilessly rips on it.
Did you work on Clippy? Was Clippy your idea?
Clippy was not. No, Clippy was before my time.
Wait, really? How old are you? I thought you were older.
Well, I'm not over 100 like you are.
Well, clearly. I mean, geez, Clippy was like, I was already middle-aged when Clippy came out.
Wait, when did Clippy come out?
Clippy came out in 98.
Because Windows XP shipped before I was there. The first project the first Windows product I worked on was XP SP2, which was like 2002.
Oh, okay. Yep. Respect to, yep.
And then, the one I really remember was Windows Vista, Longhorn for a while. And, that was pretty much start to end a total software clusterfuck.
Yep.
And we tried working on Longhorn. We worked on Longhorn for 5 years until finally they said, okay, the code base is a mess. And it was, because I remember we would have like 3 or 4 weeks go by where we never got a build from the main branch that would boot. So they ended up.
But the whole thing runs on DOS. What do you expect?
Well, no, Longhorn was it was really ambitious. It was going to be, it was a whole new operating system. It was the first one with 64-bit. It was the first one that was completely.
They got rid of the DOS code base?
The DOS code base died with Windows ME. Okay. And good riddance.
Yeah.
XP was built on Windows 2000, which was built on the NT branch.
Yeah.
So not strictly DOS. It was a true 32-bit operating system that was independent of finally got rid of the 640K memory barrier.
So the Windows 98, that was still running on DOS though, right?
Yeah. 95, 98, and ME were all the Windows 3.0 DOS based. Yeah.
I remember all those launches.
I mean, 95 hid it really well, and 98 actually got rid of it. So the only place you ever saw it was in the bootloader.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was.
Yeah, and I was NT certified back in the day. So I was a Microsoft engineer with NT SQL, and I
never got any of those certifications. Something about being an engineer at Microsoft made it seem unnecessary.
Yeah, it was really cool though, because I was a Mac guy the whole time, and I was working for a company that was a tech company, or tech service consulting company, whatever you want to call it. And I was one of the Mac guys, and my boss was a big Microsoft guy, and he kind of challenged me because I guess I had a lot of spare time. He says, why don't you take the time instead of wasting it like you are, and go study up and take the NT cert with me, because he was going to take it at the same time. And I said, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll do it. As long as you pay for the test. And so I ended up studying, and we both went in to take the NT 351, I think it was, certification. And I passed and he failed. And, he works with this stuff every day. I didn't even have a PC. I just memorized the book. And
it's not that hard.
Well, it wasn't that easy though, because they just introduced adaptive testing. That was the first one that did adaptive testing with. But oh my God, you can imagine the amount of shit that he got from everybody else for failing the test that I passed.
Did you rub it in over and over again?
Are you kidding me? I rubbed it in as much as I could rub it until there's nothing more to rub.
It's good to be vindictive. So,
yeah, especially to your boss. Yeah,
like your own personal CSB.
Awesome. But then
did you block him afterward?
Yes, I blocked my boss.
Yeah.
But then after passing that, he's like, well, shit, well, it's so damn easy for you. Why don't you take the other 5 tests and get your engineer cert? So I did that. I took one a month for 6 months, and then I got my Microsoft engineer cert. I did buy a PC in the interim, though, so I didn't purely theoretically pass them. Once I did that first NT one, then I actually was curious enough to install my own NT after that, and start tinkering with it, and really kind of for about a decade switched from Mac to PC as my main operating system. And it wasn't until 2000, it was more than a decade actually. It was about 2005 that I switched back to Mac.
Well, Mac actually got pretty good right around then for a little while, until when wasn't that the era of Jobs came back and they came up with
it's
OS
exactly
X
it. Yeah, that's exactly it.
The OS X took a huge leap ahead. And again, I was at the competition back then, and we're sitting here watching these OS X versions.
That's because it was based on Next OS.
Yeah, and
it was
we're
Unix
sitting here
based.
going when we're working on Longhorn, which we can't even fucking boot because the check-in process was such a cluster that that Longhorn is actually one of the Windows operating systems that they never shipped. They just scrapped the whole code base.
Really?
And what happened was, after 5 years of working on Longhorn, which was supposed to be the next thing after Win or after XP, they scrapped the code base entirely, went back to Server 2003, which was based on XP SP3, and started from that code base and said, okay, we have 18 months from now, let's put some consumer features in and ship it, because it doesn't matter if we get new features now or not. We have to ship a new OS. People are not buying XP anymore.
Yeah, been out forever.
And so we just had to ship something. So they took Server 2003, they stapled a bunch, and every team in Windows got to choose what features they wanted. So of course, half of them tried to shovel all their Longhorn features back into it, but at least management was cutting. So we ended up shipping Windows Vista, which was really Windows Vista start to finish was about 14 months total of development. And that's why it felt unfinished. It didn't, it was 6 years after XP, but we didn't work on Vista the whole time. That was why Vista felt so unfinished. So to go all the way back to my Dvorak story, my first real introduction to Dvorak's articles, like that I really, his name stuck in my mind, was when we had this death march of 14 months of, 12 to 14 hour days over and over again. The company was ordering pizza every night to bring in because we weren't going home until 10 p.m. Like a genuine Silicon Valley style death march. We finally get the first beta out, and Dvorak comes out with this article that just tears it up one side and down the other, and how it's terrible and how this is the end for Microsoft, and Windows XP was the last operating system you will ever use called Windows because this Vista thing is so terrible. I'm like, who the fuck is this guy?
Well, you got to remember, this is also the guy that said the mouse is nifty, but it'll never catch on.
Yeah,
and
I learned more about
he really loved OS2.
And then I saw him on Twit, and I'm like, okay, I actually really like him, but it was just such a bad introduction to his stuff. It wasn't even bad because the article that he wrote that tore it, he was right. He was right about everything.
Yeah. And this is what I'm talking about. Is like he had a knack of writing things and critiquing them in a manner where he's clearly speaking at the wrong audience, meaning people that are on the opposite side of the argument, but he is putting in enough truths in there to still make them begrudgingly have to agree with at least a part of what he's saying. And I think that he's done that his whole life. He's been the curmudgeon.
Oh, yeah. And at this point, I'm now 15, almost 20 years later. I really just want to emulate that. Like, I want to be that.
How's that going for you?
It's not. I don't. My podcast isn't as successful as his.
Yeah, that's true. But you're not doing it with Adam Curry either.
I'm not.
How successful do you think John Dvorak? Here, let's offend people. How successful do you think John Dvorak's podcast would be sans Adam?
I think that they both brought star power of their own to the show, because I came to know Agenda definitely because of John.
You may have come to know Agenda because of John, but I think John has to have a partner. Whether it's talking with Leo or talking with, what's his name, the money dude, or it's talking to Adam. Like, John solo would be worse than Darren solo.
Well, I doing my podcast now with somebody who thinks he wants to be Adam Curry.
Who's that?
Darren.
I'm sorry, I don't watch your podcast. So
yes, but you're vaguely aware that I do a podcast 2 days before the one you do with Darren. With Darren.
Oh, with Darren. Yeah, okay. I thought you were talking about something new you were starting. Okay.
No, something old.
Got it. Yeah. So yeah, you were the replacement host for me doing Grumpy Old Ben's with Darren.
Right. I replaced you on Grumpy Old Ben's. That's how it worked.
Yeah. Well, apparently the original host died or something. I can't remember what Darren told me. Something to that effect. And the show was dead. And he said, "Hey, I don't have a partner for the show, so do you want to come on?" I'm like, "Sure, that's cool." And then we started doing it, and then Darren started getting death threats. I was like, "Dude, what the hell?"
There was some disagreement about
what is going on here. I thought this guy died or something. What, isn't this why we're doing this show? And he said, "Yeah, no, I don't know. He's a dick." And then I said, "Well, why don't you just change the damn name? Come up with something better, like just Unrelenting or some shit like that."
Wait. You told him to come up with something better, and he came up with Unrelenting?
Yeah, exactly.
Better.
Did
he misunderstand?
Better than a show that was getting him death threats? Yes, I think so. That would be better. And I told him that after 2 episodes. And then for the next 25 episodes, he kept the old name. And then finally, he got tired of it, I guess, and decided, okay, fine, we'll publish under a different name now. But I guess he's resurrected that old show. I don't know.
Well, the funny thing is, it was about a year after that event that he and I were just chatting in the back room during a show it was during a No Agenda on a Sunday, and I had been doing the as the guy trying to put things on the stream, I had been going out to all the podcasters and saying, hey, you want to do a live show on Sunday? And we did, actually, for about a year, we did the Up Next Live is what I called it, where we get podcasters and try to get people to go on live right after No Agenda. I thought it was very good, but I was having a bitch of a time motivating people to want to go on Sundays, which is why we don't do that anymore. If somebody asks, maybe, but nobody does.
Yeah.
But I didn't have anybody for this particular Sunday, and I was talking to Darren about it in the back room, and it was probably an hour before John and Adam finished up. And I said, well, you want to just get together and do a Grumpy Old Ben's? And he was like, well, good. And so when No Agenda went live that morning, nobody knew that we were going to do it, including Darren and I. And we just started up and did the old intro and the old, we acted like we hadn't just taken a year off. We just went. And a lot of people are like, wait, what is this show? That was just my favorite part about bringing it back, was that we brought it back with no fanfare, nothing. It just, hey, let's go live.
That is no fanfare, but you are fibbing a little bit, because this did not happen impromptu right on that show. It happened the day beforehand, because I knew a day before you guys were going on that it was going to happen.
Can you stop
Darren can't keep his mouth?
My stories.
He can't keep his mouth shut. That might be your story. Sorry, I'm eating a little sushi here. Might be your story. It's not the story.
It's the one I was trying to push forward as the official narrative.
Well, you keep up pushing it. That's fine. Nobody listens to this, so it's all good.
I mean, if there's one thing the mainstream media has taught me, it's that the truth is whatever the official narrative decides it should be. So if I can push my version of events out there, then that becomes the truth, as long as I say it often enough, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as long as somebody's listening, it's not enough to just say it.
No. See, I'm trying to get you to help me spread my propaganda. And I know nobody's listening because you
apparently that PayPal payment didn't go through.
Shit.
Just saying.
I know you know how I know nobody's listening? Because when you said, hey, would you like to do Unrelenting with me this week? And I said, sure. Then you said, okay, then let's do it on Sunday, right when John and Adam go do a No Agenda.
Right. Well, I figured it'd be a time when Darren's busy, so he's not going to be around.
My podcasting rig, the way I have set up with the multiple monitors, my left side monitor always has the troll room. The troll room is absolutely jumping right now, just going and going and going. And I'm trying to imagine and just decide, fool myself into thinking that they are all listening to this show intently.
That would be pretty funny.
Yeah. Also, it'd be a little creepy given that we're not broadcasting it. How the hell are they listening?
Well, there's no reason that we couldn't have a live broadcast going, just not the same address as the No Agenda.
We could.
There are other shows on the No Agenda stream that do their own stream.
Might even have the passwords necessary to broadcast to some of those, but I haven't been given permission.
Oh, you do? Oh, wow. That's amazing. But you're also lazy.
I'm not only am I lazy, but I also don't actually like abusing power.
Huh.
I know I don't give that impression all the time, but
yeah, but also you're lazy, so we'll go with that.
That's the main one.
Yeah. So how long were you at Microsoft? When did you finally get out of there? Because we heard about your early days.
I was full time for 15 years. No, I was full time for just under 10, but including.
Well, you must have gotten some decent stock options that amount of time.
Yeah, and I've of course liquidated them all. I left in 14.
Okay.
Almost 10 years ago, and one of the main reasons that I left was they completely, after Windows 8, they completely restructured everything for the product that ultimately became known as Windows 10. One of the first things that they did was they got rid of 3/4 of their testers and said, devs are now responsible for frontline testing, which I knew
that's a horrible decision.
I knew it would be. And I, got to yell and scream a bunch, and they said, nope, sorry. There's obviously some cost cutting stuff going on, but if if you recall, if you used Windows 10, Windows 10 was the first operating system, and this was really obvious early on, where if you were a user of Windows 10 out in the wild, congratulations, you were their beta testers. Because they didn't have any dedicated testers anymore.
Tell you what, now, rock solid now, unlike Windows 11.
Those of us who were still there and had been in test were now charged with telemetry and data gathering. And in Microsoft, they had this idea that we were going to convert into a big data company, and Windows 10 was going to use telemetry, aka collecting every piece of information you could possibly want or get out of the operating system about every user, put them into huge databases, and then number crunch in order to figure out, oh, there's a bug here. So
they were going to out Google.
Yeah, that was in fact what they were trying to do, because they had just spent the last decade trying to out Apple, and it didn't work.
That's a good way of phrasing it.
Yeah.
So was Balmer still in place when you were there?
This was Windows 10. This was basically the first thing that Nadella did. Okay. I worked under Nadella for 7 months. Not that I thought Balmer was all that spectacular in how we ran things, but the company did all right. I don't know. Nadella was definitely the one who came in. He was data focused. He was number crunching. He was also the one who, the first thing that he did when he came in was institute huge rounds of layoffs. Microsoft had not had widespread layoffs until then. So they decided to ditch 2/3 of the testers, and the last third, the rest of us got dumped into, hey, you're now data scientists. When we had, the only thing we were really good at up until then was making, using the product, writing, my specialty was writing automation that would exercise the product and find bugs in it. And suddenly,
you were doing scripts for the testing?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't all scripts. I mean, I wrote emulators. I wrote.
I don't mean scripts as in scripting language. I mean scripts as in the process of automated testing.
And I did a lot of that. The big thing that I did was I wrote a lot of frameworks and things for harnesses, that sort of thing. But suddenly the developers, the devs, the people who up until then had been responsible for writing features only, and that was the only thing they were supposed to do, was write features and fix bugs, and they didn't have to do any more, so they could focus solidly on that. And they came out with Vista and Windows 8. And now they're like, oh, and by the way, you also need to be the ones responsible for testing your product. I knew this was going to be a nightmare. So,
yeah. Yep, I can see that. I do want to talk a little bit about games and game development. So I know that some of the people on this podcast have small bladders. So right now we're going to take a short break and then be right back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there we are. Now we're back, and the one of us that needed to go use the bathroom clearly did. So we're all good.
Wait, back from what? It felt like no time at all passed.
It did feel like that. Because I don't know about you, but I'm really fast. It takes me about 2 seconds to empty out my bladder, so it's very fast.
Yeah. Well, this robe is very absorbent, and actually, just ignore.
Shit, that's even faster. That's great. That's awesome.
So you wanted to talk about something a little bit more modern.
Well, I don't know about more modern, but I did want to chat with you because, unlike Darren, you actually play video games. About video game and development, and it's
not for very much longer. It turns out.
Wait, what's longer?
Not for very much longer. It might be.
Oh, why is that?
It's one of the reasons that I have a rant.
Okay.
So, you heard me say that I'm still running Windows 8, which is technically a discontinued operating system. Now, I could give a crap whether or not Microsoft is continuing to put out feature updates for the operating system, because I sure as hell don't need them moving an icon 4 pixels to the left on my, I don't need that. I'm fine. The operating system is running. Everything is set up the way I want. I have it locked down for security my own way. I know exactly what's going on. I have my tools that I would be happy to continue using this for quite a while. And also because I do a tech news show, I read the CVEs that come out. And so I don't recommend necessarily lots of people run without updates for a long time, but I know when most of the really hairy issues are going to come out because I read security bulletins. Okay. Problem is that, now, like the browser that I launched in order to run Zencaster here, when I launched it, I got a big ass banner at the top that said, Chromium is going to stop working on Windows 8 soon. I get that same banner with Brave, which I guess is Chromium. I get the same banner, several browsers. Firefox now has a similar banner, which is not Chromium, but all of my software now is throwing up huge banners that basically says we're going to, we're not
going to run on your OS.
Yeah, it's back in the day.
So okay, do I want to know why you haven't upgraded to Win 10?
I thought I'd made that clear in the last hour.
I mean, so it's emotional, not logical. Got it.
No, it has to do with the paternalism of the operating system. It has to do with the fact that somewhere along the line, Microsoft adopted we are going to push what we want into your system no matter what. And people who compute nowadays are okay with that, both because they're willfully moronic and about how software is supposed to work. They don't want to know. They just want someone managing for. It's like the entire world turned into Apple. Like, I don't want to know what goes on my device. You just handle it. Well, that's not what I want. It's never been what I want.
But you can still run Linux for stuff, but you can run a Windows 10 for games.
Now you're getting ahead of you. Okay. So, and by the way, I don't want to run Windows 10 for games because I don't want anybody to be able to force updates on me. I want to be able to evaluate what I put on my computer. That's been my line for a while. And Windows 8 was the last operating system that allowed me to decide when I could update and whether or not I could, whether or not
you can turn off updating on Windows 10.
I'm not updating Windows 10.
No, but you can turn off updates in Windows 10 is what I said.
Well, what I can do is I can, go into take effort to break the service. The problem
you could do that as well, but I mean, it has an option for you to just stop updates.
In the Pro has Windows an option 10. For you to defer them, but I think they'll turn it back on for you.
Yeah, you can defer them indefinitely, though.
I'm unconvinced, but the problem with updates, and again, this is very Microsoft, but it's also pervaded the entire industry, is I want security updates. It would be retarded not to take security updates. It would be retarded to say...
Well, I wasn't going to mention that, but yes.
It would be retarded to say, no, I would like my computer to remain vulnerable forever. What I don't want is feature updates. I don't want the new Edge. I don't want you to put the fucking Cortana button back on my start menu after I've deleted it for the 37th time. I don't want, I just want just patch your security holes. But Microsoft and everyone else in the world who does automatic updates don't bother making the distinction. They're like, nope, we've got an update and we are so proud of this new thing we made that you're going to take it whether it fucks your stability or not. And
so
that is
on Apple, you can selectively do updates.
On Microsoft Windows 10, you can select which updates you want, but eventually I think it's going to force, unless you have like the enterprise version or something, I think it's going to force all of them on you. There's nobody out there still running the 2016 build of Windows 10 because you can't.
I would hope not. Yeah, I would definitely hope
if I really liked that one and I customized it to be exactly what I wanted, and I was able to keep security updates so that I was patched against threats, I don't need their new UI. I don't need their new Chrome-based Edge. I don't need them to be coming through and giving me updates to software I will never use. I don't need them coming through and, putting the next version of Candy Crush on my system or so. So
what, have you finished the current version then?
No, actually I didn't want that one either. So the reason why I run Windows 10 is because I want it to be my computer. Now, everybody listening to this, which right now is none, but theoretically, if you release it, then all three of the Unrelenting users will pick it up. and maybe get this far into it, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
They are screaming at me, this is why you should be running Linux. And I actually am. As of last week, I'm dual booting this Windows 8, which is still the only one that I've got the audio pipeline working. So that's what's up right now.
So you're kind of correct in this. In Windows 10 Home, you cannot disable the updates completely. In the Pro version, you can do it through policy management. You can turn off updates. So it'll treat it just as though you're a corporate PC that is managed by the corporate update schedule.
Well, when I evaluated it, this was not, quite some time ago.
Like
but regardless,
7 years ago,
it doesn't
probably,
matter
yes.
now. At this point, if I switch to Windows 10, I would be doing this same thing in 2 years. Because Windows 10 is going completely out.
Yeah, I'm not leaving Windows 10. I'm staying on it forever.
Okay, so you have the same idea that I have, except I had the idea.
I got it set up just the way I want it. I don't want anything. I don't like Windows 11. It's
You're
bullshit.
speaking my mind. That's exactly why I'm still running Windows 8. I got it set up exactly the way I want.
Yeah, but still, that's Windows 8. I could see if you were doing that with Windows 10. I just don't understand why.
Okay, well, I was doing this with Windows 8 9 years ago. And people are like, oh, well, you should go to Windows 10. I'm like, no, not going to. Now my extra decade
at this point,
my extra decade of having a stable, usable system is just about up, which is why.
Look, I'm sure I'll go to Windows 11 maybe in 6-7 years from now.
Oh, see, I'm not going to.
Yeah, I don't see a problem. I want enough time to pass that everything gets flushed out and all the tools that I want get added, which is about 6 to 7 years after the OS comes out.
So another bit of software that, by the way, what you're describing is at some point, Windows 8 is not going to be functional. It's not going to be usable for me anymore.
Yeah.
Not because it stops working. In fact, everything in this system works exactly the way I want it to, but because
the software will stop
all
working.
of these assholes out in the software company, like there has been a change. 20 years ago, when somebody said, I'm not supporting that product, what they mean is, use at your own risk because you're not going to be getting any help desk from me. Now, when companies like Google come out and say, I'm not supporting that product, what they mean is they are adding code to break your experience if they detect the product they don't like.
Right.
And that is it might be a subtle distinction, but it's an asshole move. And it's just something everyone does now. And there's another software company that I get a big ass banner that says, fuck you, we're going to disable everything soon, is every time that I launch Steam, I get a big ass banner that says, your digital library is going to be remotely rendered useless in now I think it's 170 days or whatever it is, but it's been counting down. The fucking banner has been showing
for what
the number
now?
of days.
For which thing?
Steam.
Yeah, but for what's it going to render useless? What are you talking about?
I'm saying they're going to disable the Steam client on Windows 8.
Oh, okay. Got it.
They are going to make it so that Steam will not launch. Now, I do not want the Steam client. I don't fucking shop.
No, you just want the software itself.
I don't want Steam at all. There is nothing about Steam that I want on my system. What I want is for games that I have purchased and paid for and have played for a long time to work. But the problem, of course, as you well know, is that Steam has DRM, which means these games will not fucking launch unless Steam is running. And when Steam
that's always been a problem with Steam.
When Steam says, fuck you, this software will never launch after this date on your operating system, what they are really saying is, unless you go and bend over for Microsoft's paternalistic bullshit, we are locking you out of your entire digital library. So I have 170 something days to finish and say goodnight to every game I've ever purchased on Steam. And that's not actually true. That's not actually true.
It's not actually true.
The other operating system that I'm trying, I'm working now to try to finally get away from Windows 8.
You're finally getting a Mac.
No, I installed Arch.
What's Arch?
It's a Linux variant.
Oh, okay.
And that may be a terrible mistake. And all the people who know more things about which distros I should use might tell me, hey, don't use that. But we'll see.
Hey, Linux is hit a milestone.
Is this the year of Linux on the desktop finally?
It is. They've finally hit 3%. 3% of desktop is now Linux. It's a miracle.
Well,
after 20 years,
Microsoft's pulling. I'm not surprised.
I like Linux. I don't see anything wrong with it. I've run it on and off for many, many years. I will say, in my current job capacity and my current hobbying time, I do not run any copies of Linux. The last one I ran was for Bitcoin related stuff. But I just, I run the PC for games and I run the Mac for all the business shit.
I have a Linux machine that I've been running for about 2 years now, 3, which is running Debian. And that's where my Bitcoin node is.
Okay. But there you go.
So the one good thing that Valve has done, and whenever I bring up this argument, people are like, well, Valve has been really good about making sure that games come to Linux. And that's probably true. And there is some subset, I'm not sure which ones, of my library that I might still be able to use once I move over to Linux. But there are also a bunch of games that I have paid money for. I paid the purchase price to be able to play these indefinitely. And through no fault of my own, these software companies are conspiring to break my experience. And that is what infuriates me.
Yeah, I could see it, but also you're such a tiny minority that you're right off. Like
I understand that. Companies. And we had a saying in Windows, which was, if you break a feature for 1% of users, Windows at the time when we were working on this was Windows 7. Windows had about a 2 billion install base, which is a lot of damn computers. Well, what's 1% of 2 billion? That's how many people you're fucking over. 200,000.
Do you have music playing in the background?
No, one of my neighbors is running a grinder.
Oh, grinder. That's what it is. I was like, I noticed that it only pops up when you talk. So I figured your gate has to be cutting it off the rest of the time.
When I talk,
so that's a grinder. That's hilarious. Yeah. Well, if anybody else has heard that and now you know what it is. I definitely, I'm not as passionate about it as you are, but I have similar feelings about Steam. I love the convenience of having every single game in one place. I love being able to install games on a new computer very quickly and simply out of my library. I like that Steam backs up all the data files.
And so almost everything would be forgiven if I didn't have to launch Steam just to launch a game.
Just to launch a game. Yeah. And I agree with that because there's certain games you can actually bypass Steam, but you have to log into the game manually. But for other games, it's literally impossible to bypass Steam.
Yes. And it depends on whether or not the game developer integrated the Steam API.
Well, and essentially, like I'll give you an example. A game I've come back to recently, used to play it a lot, and then I stopped for about 3 years. Now I'm back to it. Is Elite Dangerous, and they have their own launcher. So all Steam does is just launch their launcher.
Yeah.
Well, I can launch their launcher just as easy as Steam can launch their launcher.
Yeah,
if I do that, I have to manually log in. Whereas if I do it from Steam, I click play on Steam, and it automatically knows who I am and launches it.
Most of the games I play, I don't even launch from Steam. Like if I have to have Steam running, the process has to be going in order for the game to work. But I'll start the thing and then I immediately kill it because I want no interaction with the Steam program at all.
Right. Yeah.
What I do then is I go, well, again, this is one of those places that I am freaking weird. And God, they're like grinding down the whole house or something.
It sounds like it.
I run almost everything from a command line. I have at any given time like 6 console windows open. This is why I'm going to do okay on Linux, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
I also type very fast and I know my file system really well. So I will type, D games, apps, whatever, and I will launch from the command line the executable for the game, which every one of them ultimately has to have an exe. And that's how I launch the game. I don't use Steam.
But no, you still use it to buy games, though, right?
Not,
or you have been until now.
Not in the last 5 or 6 years. Once I realized that somewhere along the line, I discovered the ultimate problem with digital libraries, anything DRM, is that they will eventually be shut off. It's not, they might be.
That's true.
Early on, I was like, oh, if they have DRM, they might be shut off. Then I realized somewhere along the line, digital libraries will be shut off. And so I stopped buying games. I still will get games from GOG, for example. I will still redeem a code for a free game or something if I find one. But I think the newest purchase that I've made on Steam was maybe Fallout 4, which I think was 2016.
I definitely still buy them on Steam. I just love the convenience of it. And while I'm annoyed that Steam has to be running, it's an annoyance. It's not a,
well, it's an annoyance right up until, 2025, Windows 10 goes out of support. 2025, Steam is going to start popping up a banner in your app that says, you need to move to Windows 11. Steam is going to stop working in so many days, and it's going to start counting down every time you launch it. And then you will have the decision of going to an operating system you hate, or you lose access to your whole library.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll do an episode at that point where I'll be going through and doing what you're doing.
Yeah, could be. In fact, we should schedule this now. We'll do an episode.
Yeah, we probably should.
In 2025, where I tell you, I told you so.
Dude, the week after July 4th, 2025, we'll do an episode. Okay. Exactly. We'll make it a date.
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful on two counts. One is that Steam has been leading the charge to make games available and playable on the Mac platform.
And Linux. And I appreciate it.
And Linux, yeah. And then two is Unreal had a huge announcement for at least those of us in the gaming development world that they are now going to be doing native compiles in Unreal 5 for the M2 chips or the M series of chips.
That's kind of shiny.
Which means games on the Mac will run faster than they are on the newest PC platform.
Considering that Unreal is basically the only viable big 3D engine left after Unity imploded.
Yeah. And I'm a fan of Unreal. I've programmed in Unreal.
Oh yeah, it's epic
for a decade. And it's a good engine. I've done stuff in Unity as well. Unity, while it's certainly usable, I don't like as much.
Well,
but the latest features in Unreal Engine 5 are just amazing.
My understanding was that Unity ended up getting sold to a Chinese firm who I don't remember where I heard this rumor, but that the whole engine was going to be going pay only.
Oh, really?
I might have just started the rumor, but I thought I had heard
it. Maybe. Yeah, there's not much. So the topic I want to bring up, and I'm going to assume that you are not a player of Star Citizen.
I am not.
What have you heard about it?
What I know about it, I got from you.
Okay. So Star Citizen, for people that don't know, is a game that was crowdfunded literally a decade ago and has been in alpha for about a decade, which should raise some eyebrows. But what they've done is, I think it's in the software industry, or in other industries, frankly, it's called feature creep. It's when a project is not stabilized, but is allowed to keep adding more and more functionality and features conceptually, where the actual production cannot keep up with the feature set that is being added. And as a result, you have a product that is unreleased and unfinished and is likely to remain in that state.
I just want to tell you, really, really quick side note. My absolute favorite Easter egg in Diablo 2, so this is 20 years ago or so, was there was like a 1 in 100 chance of this enemy spawning, but it would show up in a pack of zombies that you were killing left and right. And it was a boss zombie that was unkillable and could absolutely destroy you. And the only way to do was you had to leave the area, and if you came back, he wouldn't be there.
Okay.
And the boss zombie was named the Feature Creep. Or maybe, no, it was the Creeping Feature.
The creeping feature. Yeah. That's good. That's good. That's somebody had some good creativity.
Unkillable zombie called the creeping feature.
Exactly. So, back on this topic. So the company that makes Star Citizen is called CIG, Cloud Imperium Gaming. And they were essentially the team of about 15 people that ran the Kickstarter. This team now, 10 years later, this company is now at 1,100 head count. That's 1,100.
They haven't
has studios. They do have openings. They have studios in multiple locations, including Austin, here where I am. And I've met a number of their folks here in Austin. The guy that was the main sort of face of the Kickstarter is still the CEO of the company. They have, as they say, raised, as other companies would say, sold over $500 million worth of this game, which is still an alpha, mind you. According to everything you read on the website, this is an alpha game.
Yeah, but after Gmail was in beta for 16 years, I feel like the alpha and beta labels are kind of not meaning as much these days. They certainly don't mean what they meant back in the 90s.
Back when we were programming, yes. But I think the reason that it's an alpha perpetually is because it allows them to not be sued for things like selling things that don't exist. And may never exist.
Oh, yeah. There's a special, like all kinds of special issues that can crop up as like when people are spending real money on ships and things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you the little MacGuffin thing that they just walked into here, which is biting them in the ass, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do is. So they've been selling spaceships for the game for years and years now, ever since the Kickstarter. It's one of the ways you could crowdfund is let's say you pledge $500, you got a particular spaceship when the game's released. Now, they have been releasing ships every year, so it's not like they haven't released anything. Currently, there's about, I think, 110 spaceships that are in the game that are fully released. But the game itself is what's not finished. But they just now added like clothes, like a spacesuit, basically, to their online store, so that now you can spend $10 and buy a spacesuit. But this is where the problem comes in, is that like there's nothing wrong with that. Tons of games sell clothing items, right?
Sure. Oblivion had horse armor.
There you go. Here's where this is a problem. Is in its current version, they have recently, meaning this year, the beginning of the year, they added this thing called persistence. Persistence means that an item in the game is a unique item, and it's not a temporary item. Meaning, let's say I go and I mine some rocks and I get a crate of rocks that I mine. I can take that crate, fly it in a spaceship, land on some random planet or moon, walk 200 yards, place that crate there, go back in my spaceship and leave. And that crate will be there indefinitely at that location.
Okay.
Until either I come back and pick it up or somebody else stumbles across it and picks it up and does something with it. So everything in the game is now quote unquote persistent.
So I can steal your crate of rocks.
You can, but guess what else you can steal? Like, let's say you shoot me and I'm wearing an armor that I just bought for $10.
Oh.
And you can now steal that armor.
That's now a game design. That's a bold game design decision. If you can take away things that people paid for.
So the way they do it with spaceships is you can never really lose a spaceship you bought with real money, because if it gets destroyed or stolen, you can file an insurance claim and get it back in roughly half an hour, anywhere between 10 minutes and 2 hours, depending on the size of the spaceship. So you never really lose it. They don't have the same mechanic for smaller items like guns, armor, things that are not vehicles, basically. And all that stuff is totally lootable. So people are up in arms saying, do you realize what you just did to all the new players that are coming in? And they're like, oh, I want to have a nice suit of armor so I don't have to go out and, well, in this game, it's a spacesuit. It's not a suit of armor, but same idea.
The people who are coming from Xbox and PlayStation where, your Call of Duty special patch on your thing that you paid for, or even something you got from an achievement, is yours permanently, even if you uninstall the game and reinstall it or create a new character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they put it on and they go into this game and they're a noob and they inevitably die because this game does have a lot of death. And then they wake up in a hospital wearing a hospital robe and they go, okay, well, how do I get this off? They figured that out. Then they look in their inventory for their armor and it's gone. For their spacesuit. I keep saying armor, but same difference. There are going to be a lot of pissed off people. There's like, wait a minute, I paid $10 for this and it took me 1 hour to lose it. This is bullshit. Because you know what definition of gambling is? That's pretty damn close to it. This is turning the game into a gambling game. So now their answer to this is it's not a release game. So everything is subject to change. And you will never lose items you purchase. You will always have them in the released game.
Okay. I was going to say,
how many years away from that?
Calling it an alpha is not going to protect them if they're going up against online gambling laws.
Well, and they did two things here. They're sticking with their alpha thing. I think that's purely based on legal. And they've moved the company from the United States to the UK. And a lot of people think it's because, well, he's British. He wants to be closer to his family. Bullshit. The reason they left the United States is because they know legally, they're going to be sued into oblivion if they stay here, given their business processes.
So they're worried about being sued into oblivion by a government with an oppressive legal structure and authoritarian tendencies. So they leave the U.S. and go where again?
To the UK, right. Well, in the UK, they're a slightly bigger fish in a small pond because there are programs that
means just
they take advantage of.
That just means
in being a game studio there. It does. And also the EU has lots more regulations around gaming than the United States does.
Yeah, I've been reporting on the kinds of things that the EU passes. Just are a lot of them are on their face. Support consumers, but
they sound good.
They sound good. They have great propaganda attached to them. And some of them even do help the consumers in some way. And I always look at this, first of all, every single one of them is the kind of thing that is anathema to the idea of a free culture because they're saying,
oh, totally.
But even beyond that, you look at this and go, I can see all kinds of unintended consequences, and I don't even see that much evidence that they're unintended.
I'll give you an example of an idea of a EU regulation that I really like, even though it's anti-free, business, which is the new requirement for all phones to have USB-C connectors.
Yes.
I want my frickin' iPhone to have USB-C, and I've been bitching about that ever since it doesn't have one. And the only reason Apple isn't putting USB-C on there is because they can sell more cables that cost less than $1 to make, and I paid $29 to buy.
I'm not convinced that that's the only reason, but I'm sure.
I think it's a huge financial reason for them doing it.
No, what I'm saying is I bet if I, had access to the Cupertino, I could find an engineer who would be able to spell out the exact technical reasons why the Lightning connector is superior and the USB-C doesn't allow them to do some feature that they think would be better for consumers.
Yeah, well, he'd be smoking crack because they've had USB-C on their iPads now for several years. Well, and they work perfectly fine.
It would be a lot of spin, but there'd also be the argument. Yeah. I'm just saying that there's probably a technical excuse.
When they introduced Lightning and USB was at best on 2.0, there were good arguments for it. Today, I think there have been no arguments for several years. It's almost like they're just waiting to liquidate their inventory before making the switch. But I think everybody knows they will eventually. It's just a question of when. And now that we have a EU regulation, it would be crazy for them to make two physically different versions of the iPhone, one with USB for USB-C for Europe, and then one for the rest of the world. I mean, they could. I just don't see them doing it. I think they'll take the opportunity to say that, come up with a whole list of benefits that Apple now has done by putting in USB-C. In fact, they could maybe even put in Thunderbolt, not just USB-C, and talk about how they're the only phone that has Thunderbolt in it and how awesome that is. So I don't know why it would need it, but whatever.
In general, whenever somebody proposes that a government step in and do a regulation to fix some kind of consumer harm that is going on, my initial reaction is always that this is unnecessary, and if you just let the free market work, it will correct that. The reason why it can't work with Apple is straight up, Apple has a monopoly. They work very hard to keep a monopoly on the market for these devices. Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I stay out of the market for these devices. An hour ago, I was bitching very loudly about Discord. Apple is exactly the same thing. It is a space where there is only one possible vendor, only one set of people who are going to tell you what it's like. I don't want to play in that space. That's why I don't have an Apple device.
And I generally agree with that, but I also really like the ecosystem.
Yes, but imagine for a moment if the European Parliament were more savvy and at least had heard of the concept of freedom a little bit, or thought that if they really wanted to help the consumer, here's what I would recommend instead. Break up Apple's monopoly on the ecosystem. Now, that might mean forcing them to publish specs. It might mean, do not allow them to lock in the app ecosystem or the store to only their hardware. It might mean separate the hardware from the operating system so the operating system can plug in different devices. Something that allows competition in the space of handsets, and somebody out there would come up with a USB-C version, and you wouldn't have to go all authoritarian and step in and say, Apple, you have to change your design.
They did that once. So I don't know if you remember, but they did that in the late 80s. So after Jobs was ousted, they started a third-party compatible device program.
Who started?
Apple did.
Okay.
And so starting with the late 80s through the early 90s, you could buy a Macintosh that was made by Apple, or you could buy a Macintosh compatible computer. And there were a couple of companies, and I'm blanking out on their names, but there were two main ones that kind of rose out of that to prominence. That was a fully Apple supported compatible computer.
Okay.
And here's what happened. They were significantly better than the Apple products.
Okay.
And all the people that were using Apple's, like for video production, audio production, for commercial purposes, graphic design, they all migrated off the Apple platform onto these new devices because these guys would release more frequently than Apple does.
That's called competition.
They would have more features.
Free market.
And they made ultimately better designed products. So if you took them apart, the Apple one looked neat. These looked practical.
And in a free market, that sort of pressure would force Apple to improve their product to make things that people want. However, in a regulatory capture market, what they do is Apple will discontinue the program.
That's exactly what happened.
That locks it down to their hardware only, reduce consumer choice, and ultimately make it worse for everybody except Apple. Of course, the monopolists want to continue their monopoly.
That's absolutely what happened. So I think these products were out for about 5-6 years, maybe. And then Apple once again changed their minds, went back to a lockdown system where they make both the hardware and the software. They weren't willing to just be the software company. And it's hard to say who made the decision. I will certainly say I think the board of directors acting on behalf of the stockholders.
Apple made the
certainly.
decision.
Well, yes, Apple. But who is Apple?
The corporation is legally a person, and therefore we need to hold the corporation responsible.
But that person doesn't make independent decisions.
By the way,
decisions are made by the boards.
You want to fix 95% of the bullshit that's wrong with corporations today? Eliminate corporate personhood. Make it so that an executive of the company can be personally held liable for whatever the corporation does, and you will see corporations start to improve their behavior real fucking fast.
Oh, that's true. That is true, but also I think you would stifle a lot of corporate risk taking.
What corporate risk taking? The innovation always happens in small startups, and then they get bought by corporations. That's not risk taking.
Yeah, well, small corporations are still corporations. If you start dude, like the company that I started with Adam that eventually never went anywhere. That was a corporation. It's like,
are you saying you wouldn't have done it?
If there was personal liability on me for a $1 million Kickstarter to deliver a product that people expected, hell no. Absolutely would not have done it. I don't need that kind of risk. I don't need to get sued by people that think that the product was supposed to do one thing because they saw Adam talking about it, and then it didn't do that one thing. It did something different.
Well, my position still stands. I think corporations should not be legally treated as people because, among other things, you can't throw a corporation in jail and they'll never die.
Well, you can, and this I've talked about. So if you actually put just two good old boys on the replay list, then you'd hear some of this stuff. But I talked about how do we fix that, right? How do we put a corporation in jail? Well, there is a way to do it.
You put the executives in jail.
No, not even that. No,
you put all the shareholders
the corporations
in jail. Every one of
have
them.
Oh my God, no. Corporations have a charter. You get the charter from the state, so you're not a legal entity, you're not a person without that charter. So what the government can do if the corporation is found guilty of doing some evil deed is to temporarily revoke the charter, not to dissolve the corporation, so the stockholders don't lose all their equity in the business. Everything stays the same. You can't do business. You can't do any business until your charter is reinstated. So it is a financial punishment to the corporation, absolutely, but it is not a liquidation of the corporation. I don't think anybody wants to give the government the power to just say, we found that company X, pick your company, whatever, did something bad. So now we're going to liquidate the company and take it over as the government and then do a fire sale on it. I don't want that. I don't think most people want that. But can the government or should the government be able to say, hey, Pfizer, you fucked up. Guess what? You are not allowed to sell your pills in the United States for the next 3 months of any of your pills, any products that you sell. You're not allowed to sell them for the next 3 months.
Why are you talking over me? Oh, because I'm muted. If Apple, if you try to do this to Apple, first of all, I don't even think you can, but because of what I'm about to say. But you do this, say you've got a company in Austin that is doing awful things, and the state of Texas comes down and says, we find you guilty of this. We are going to tell you can't do business. Then if I'm running that company, the first thing I do is I willingly shut down the company and sell all of the assets of the company to this new shell company I'm founding somewhere else away from Texas. And then that new company is now, operating under the same name, but a different jurisdiction and does exactly the same thing. Where's the punishment?
Well, I think you have to go. I mean, maybe when I said don't let them sell the products, I'm being too narrow in that, because what I mean is without the charter, you can't conduct business, which means you can't sell assets either. Like the company is frozen effectively. What are we doing with all that billions of dollars of Russian money that the EU is trying to steal and give themselves?
I don't know. They're not giving it to me.
It's frozen. They're not giving anybody any of it. It's frozen. Russia can't use it because the EU didn't like what Russia did. And they said, hey, by the way, that money you kept in those UK banks, we're not saying we're going to steal that money, but we're also saying you can't touch it.
Well, I know I also know that they keep trying to come up with excuses that.
Oh, absolutely. They're trying to legitimately steal it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, it won't be legitimate, but what they're trying to do is come up with, like, what is the right spin we can put on this that will allow us to steal it without really pissing off.
Well, did you hear the latest one? The latest one that they're going to do?
No.
They said they're going to start imposing fines that will be automatically paid from those frozen funds. And so, and the fines are, they're arbitrary bullshit fines, but their idea is like, well, that's something that we can do now.
They're just heating up the frog.
Yeah, exactly. That's all that's happening. But they're also suiciding because every other country, and I'm looking at you, Saudi Arabia, is going to be going, they don't really like us a whole lot either if it wasn't for all this oil that we're pumping out. Maybe we should take our trillions of dollars that we've put in those banks that the royal family holds elsewhere.
Only. I mean, not that I want the economic destruction of the United States or of the Western countries, but if that's what it takes to release the grip of these absolutely corrupt cabals that have taken over, let's do that. I'd rather be free and poor than live a slave. I know I'm unusual. I know that I am almost unique amongst Americans who would be much happier if they just, let me live my life and depress me all you want as long as I get my Netflix.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot more of those people here in Texas than where you're at.
Where I'm at, they're all woke. They all think that everything is going great. They're like, government control of all industry, bring it on. Then the state can come and give us our daily rations and we'll be thrilled.
That's right. It's as I was listening to Andrew Tate's interview with Tucker yesterday, I talked a lot more about it on Just Do Good Old Boys podcast that I recorded earlier today. But
I didn't listen to that one.
I know, but you can add that to the stream, and then you will hear the episode tomorrow. But much like I said there, I think if you watch that interview that Tucker did with Tate, I basically said Tate for president. I mean, the guy is throwing wisdom and truth around like there's no tomorrow. And he is definitely being railroaded. There's no other way to put it. He's not guilty of the things that U.S. media.
You already said he's throwing truth around. Of course he's being railroaded.
Yeah, totally railroaded. But that's the thing is when you have media that is aggressively working on propaganda for the state, you're in the final phases of an empire.
Yeah. Well, we've had that for 7-8 years now, at least.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, Obama. Possibly, yeah. I was going to say since Obama.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He was really the last American dictator that pushed us over the edge into the dissolution of the empire.
Yeah.
Use the Roman
it's
analogy.
Fun to watch it in real time. I just wish I didn't have to live it.
Yeah. There is a guilty pleasure for sure aspect, but living it has a price, a cost to pay.
And I absolutely feel like I'm behind enemy lines. Like whenever
especially where you live.
Whenever I look outside and see somebody walking up the sidewalk with a fucking diaper on their face in 2023 and walking past the Black Lives Matter sign in my neighbor's yard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's dystopia, man. I mean, it's a world where people are living in a world created by propaganda and ignoring the actual real world around them.
Well, they don't even.
There have been numerous movies on this topic where people are essentially told that the world is gloom and dark and there's nuclear rain outside. And then by the end of the movie, our protagonist manages to escape and realizes the world is clean and beautiful.
I mean, we're living in the one where everybody is being suppressed because everybody is stuck in the same virtual reality world. It's just all of the sci-fi will have you, like the full sensory VR kit where you sit in a chair or something. We've definitely miniaturized that because now the virtual reality that has us all trapped fits in your palm. Mm-hmm. And people just like I said,
and what did Apple just come out with?
I don't know. I don't pay attention to Apple.
Well, you covered tech news. Oh. Come on. You know what they came out with.
Oh, yeah. The one that requires a prescription and a custom fitting. And yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. It's a $4,000 best in the world VR headset.
But it's still a VR headset.
It is a VR headset, but it is 16,000 pixels.
I don't see this
super high resolution.
And the reason is that
I think it's like every Apple product when it first comes out. You never want to buy Gen 1.
Well, I didn't see a lot of the things that Apple created succeeding, and then they did. So I'm probably not the right person.
iPhone, iPod.
Yeah, I don't. Believe it or not, I don't cover product releases on my show anyway, because I feel like there's enough tech news that just cover press releases. So I don't like to cover press releases, and I don't like to cover product announcements or anything.
And your show is called Grumpy Old Tech News?
It's called Angry Tech News.
Right, right.
I would go along with your joke, but I want people to be able to find it. My show is called Angry Tech News.
Well, I wanted to give you the ability to fix that in real time. So that's good.
Yes.
Yeah, it's well, and you always remind me, because you have a fairly similar speech pattern to a guy that has a YouTube channel called The Angry Astronaut.
Okay, but I've never been outside the atmosphere.
Right. Well, neither's he.
Oh, well,
he doesn't even work in the industry, but he has an opinion. He has an opinion, and he is he gets quite upset at things that Boeing is doing quite frequently.
I believe that.
So it's fun to watch.
Well, I live like within 3 miles of Boeing's main plant in Everett.
Yep. Which is another example of a once great American company gone to shit.
It was absolutely amazing. Like for quite a while, every single 737 and 747 that was ever made, I got to watch it first.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first flight would go, well, not quite right overhead, thank God. But I could see watching a 737 with no markings on it is a pretty normal thing.
Yeah.
Like before they've painted it for the airline.
And not just because you live next to Area 51.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't cover releases. I have not covered the VR thing. My thoughts on this VR headset are that Apple might get past one of the main blockers of the VR stuff, which is that you look like a fucking fool. Because they've made something that basically looks like an oversized set of Ray-Bans.
Yeah.
But
or I would say a ski mask.
Yeah,
but
it does. It looks like ski goggles.
The thing that's creative, serves no technical purpose, but is absolutely could be a game changer, we don't know yet, is the fact that they put OLED panels on the front of it and cameras inside and are projecting your eyes on the outside of the device. So to people around you, it looks like you're looking around. You have eyeballs.
And I can't wait to find out the long-term effects of using that too much.
Yeah, I guess there might be some. I'm not a fan of those. I've never been a fan, but predominantly for the reason of resolution. I just found them just not having enough resolution.
Yeah, and I've enjoyed the resolution of every screen going way, way up, and novice programmers who are like, yep, I'm 22, and therefore I think this 2-point font is perfect.
Right.
Exactly. As I'm getting older.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm at that point as well, where now I'm not necessarily sticking with the 1-to-1 fonts. Like 2-point is an exaggeration, but certainly there are real world plenty of people using 8 points. And I'm like, no, let's use 12 points.
Yeah. I have one particular app which is hard coded to 6-point, and I have to pull out the magnifier app in Windows. But the bigger problem, and the one that's is a much bigger problem, is no matter what point size you do, if you measure your font size by pixels, then you are absolutely screwing over everybody with a Retina display or whatever. Mm-hmm. Because 12 pixels high on a modern iPhone is still impossible to read.
Yeah. Yeah, they're doing anywhere between 212 and 360 pixels per inch.
Yeah.
So the old definition of a pixel just doesn't stand out.
And I still have plenty of old software that does not adapt to the higher resolution. Mm-hmm. I have 3 monitors, and 2 of them are still bog standard 1920 by 1080 24-inch monitors, and the one in the middle is 4K at approximately the same physical dimensions. So if I want to run one of those small apps, I definitely have to put it onto the side monitor.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I've got a okay. I've got a 4K 47-inch screen on the PC, and I've got a 4K 43-inch screen on the Mac. And then I've got a couple of 27-inch monitors on the PC on the sides of that screen as well. So I'm surrounded literally on 3 sides by monitors where I'm sitting here, bathing in the radiation, as it were.
Well, but, when you need all that vitamin D and you don't want to go outside.
I know, that's exactly it.
In the UV glow,
because it's freaking hot outside. It's
probably warmer where you are.
It's 110.
That's warmer than it is here. Here,
I would hope so.
What is it currently? 76 degrees.
Oh, that's nice.
And 76 degrees inside because air conditioning isn't really a thing.
Yeah. No, that's good. No, it's like 78 here inside and 110 outside.
Well, I'm still getting my sweat on.
Uh-huh.
It probably doesn't help that I podcast from a lazy boy.
There's nothing wrong with lazy boys. I prefer a nice, comfy chair, like an office chair, but nothing wrong with lazy boy.
There's a couple things wrong. It's not the best ergonomics, but it is real nice
for talking.
For talking, for talking, it's fine. For coding, for example, not so much.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, don't you have a standing desk like every other developer?
I wish.
You could get one at IKEA for dirt cheap.
I'm on a podcaster.
If we lived closer, I could send you mine. I've got an extra one in the garage.
I'm on a podcaster salary. Dirt cheap is relative.
I think they're literally down to like $200 now.
I also have so much freaking clutter in this house.
Yeah.
One of the reasons.
That's a different issue.
When we started podcasting, I just pretty much just stuck the microphone out, and a couple of weeks in, I said to Darren, should I be treating this room somehow, or because there's a for example a blank wall behind the microphone, but he said, no, I'm not hearing any echoes, you sound fine, so your room is apparently treated well enough. And I look around and I didn't put any fancy stuff on the walls, there's just that much clutter.
Yeah, as long as the clutter is non-metallic, it's probably going to absorb some sound.
And I'm sure I've been absorbing plenty of it.
Yeah, I'm sure that to some extent there's plenty that the human body will absorb as well. But your head's going to be blocking a lot of it from bouncing.
Yeah.
Because your mouth is close to the microphone.
Not that close. With this this RE320 is so forgiving. I'm probably 7-8 inches away.
Really? I'm usually about an inch and a half.
Well, if I were in an actual chair and sitting up, I would be, but I would have to readjust the boom arm to come down, and then I'd be bumping my head into it when I sat up.
Yeah, but they're movable.
I don't understand.
You can move the boom arm.
I don't get it.
It's a thing.
Oh, wow. Learn something new every day.
Yeah. It's not like it's just perma stuck right out of the wall in a straight line to your face.
So we're pushing up on the 2-hour mark. Is there anything else you want to have to get to?
No, I was going to start wrapping up because I think we're doing good. We covered some topics.
I'm sorry. Let me be more subtle. How do you usually end these shows?
There's really not a format. I know you've never heard one of these, so it's hard for you to know, but there's not really a format. I mean, the whole point of Unrelenting is it's the Seinfeld of podcasting. It's a show about nothing with no particular topic and no agendas. So we literally show up with no notes and we just talk about whatever happens to come up to either person for whatever reason. Usually talk with Darren. It seems to lately there's a lot more health conversation about different drugs and different ailments and whatnot.
That happens when you get old.
We did. Yeah. And I think some people enjoy that. Other people think it's stupid. But clearly with you, it's definitely been more technically leaning than I do with him. He's a total
more technical
noob at technology. So I mean, I'm just lucky he knows how to push a button.
It's kind of refreshing to be able to come without notes and just talk about stuff. I don't know if it makes a more interesting show or not, but both of my shows...
Well, it does for the people on the show.
Yeah, it is. Both of the shows that I do, both ATN and Grumpy Old Ben's, both of them, I come having done quite a bit of research about topics that I want to cover.
Yeah.
And, the Grumpy Old Ben's, I do a lot more political stuff, but it usually has some kind of tech intersection. And ATN, I try to stay away from politics. I'm not very good at that, but I try. And try to bring I'm not going to do press releases and I'm not going to do, product launch. And I also don't do rumors, which means, what's left, the things that I find interesting and think are valuable, which tends to be a lot of security news. I don't just report on breaches anymore because there's so damn many of them. I didn't want to bore everyone, but they happen. And if a breach really impacts people, I really like corporate malfeasance from Silicon Valley. That's a pet topic of mine. I'm sure people are sick of by now, but they never stop. And
you can just cover that and have plenty of topics to talk about.
It pretty much is half of every show.
So tell the people once again that if they're listening to this, because it's on the Unrelenting stream, and where can they find your podcast?
I have two. One I do with Darren O'Neill called Grumpy Old Ben's, which was a precursor. It was the warm up to Unrelenting. It was we got all the things wrong so that Unrelenting could do it right. And I do that with Darren O'Neill on Wednesdays on the No Agenda stream at No Agenda time, which I guess would be 11 a.m. left coast. The other show that I do live on Tuesdays at the same time, but you don't have to listen live because it's a nice short show. Why
are you doing that one live? That doesn't make any sense.
I do it live in order to force myself to do it.
Oh, okay.
I do it live so that
I figured you were doing it like Sunday nights or something and just uploading it later.
No, I actually do it live on Tuesdays. And the reason I do it live on Tuesdays is so that I have a deadline and a timetable to force myself to do it, because when I wasn't doing it live, every once in a while, something would come up and I'd be like, nobody's really listening. I can push this out to Wednesday. Actually, I can push it to Thursday. And then suddenly a week goes by and I didn't do one.
Yeah.
So it is for me. And I don't care if you listen live to that one or not, but it's a much shorter show that is just pure tech news, but it's not just news because everything I do is opinion. I have opinions on everything.
Yes.
And that's called Angry Tech News. I had somebody ask me once, said, wait, you do two shows. One of them is grumpy and one of them is angry. You sound like a very unhappy person. I said, have you looked at the world outside?
Yeah.
My superpower.
It makes sense.
My superpower is getting cranky with people doing bad things.
You do have a little bit of that Constanza thing going on.
I'm good at it. And it's not like, I tell people that's my secret.
Good that you found your superpower.
The other thing is something, on Grumpy Old Ben's, we determined that was what people wanted. So I kind of cultivated it, which might not be great for my blood pressure. But
well, and people like drama. As much as people say they don't like drama, they ultimately are drawn to drama, which is also, I think, why the episodes that have the most disagreements on them tend to work the best.
And so you bring me on because you want to agree with everything I say. We've never disagreed.
I know we've done this before. We are the two most agreeable people you could ever imagine.
We've never had a topic we disagreed on. And so when you bring me on, it's not going to be a good show.
It's true. Yeah, that's true. I'm not expecting much. I have low expectations for that.
That's good.
But I did want to give Darren a week off to, recuperate from his pretend mouth seas that he's got. And yet, with both of us not having had a show, I figured, well, this is good. Let's kill two birds with one stone.
Works for me.
Cool. All right, man. That's it. We done.
Yay!
Now Darren can slap the music and all that good stuff in there.
From
still give him something to
coast. Sorry, that's my sign out from the other one.
From the American left coast.
Yeah, my sign out now is from America's left coast, where it is now safe to turn off your computer.
I don't get it. How's that?
That's what Windows says when you tell it to shut down and it churns for a while.
Oh, it's now safe to turn off your computer. Okay.
Turn off your computer.
That's good. Okay, you have to explain it to me.
I do. Well, and if I have to explain it to you, I probably have to explain it to everyone else, and they're all confused when I use it, but I don't care. I podcast for listeners. I podcast for me.
That's true. I do as well. And I think it's pretty evident.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Hopefully Darren will feel better and both of our shows will return back to having
He will recharge and he will come back out of the gate swinging.
Or something.
So remember to duck.